Good evening, and thanks again for joining us for another edition of Ideas Exchange. Tonight, our conversation will be very special because we want to look at Ghana, we want to look at African countries, Africa's great potential that is following, most especially because we've spoken about this for several years, but it will look as if either African governments are not waking up to this clarion call, or some unseen hands are tying the hands of our governments to their back, to the extent that you and I are not witnessing that potential that should generate growth, generate job opportunities and prosperity for all. You'd know that Africa, maybe 61 years ago, saw the birth of the Organization of African Unity. At that time, I'm told about 34 countries had gained independence. Over the years, we thought that OAU, with all the objectives they had, was to see African countries coming together to exploit their resources and how they can do intra-African trade for prosperity of the continent, just as Americas or the European countries, or if you go to Asia, the Asian countries will be seeing themselves as a bloc. But I remember in 2002, the OAU was transformed to the African Union. We've heard names like the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, for example, which was supposed to look at the governance aspect, which would deal with poor governance, corruption, abuse of people, and so on, to make sure many African states are on the same pedal for common growth. In the sub-regional level, we have several of them. ECOWAS belongs to us, those of us in West Africa, for example. They've spoken about integrating their currencies, so I've heard of ECO. Several attempts have been made. But in all this, many people will agree that the West, many of these countries in the West, which have exploited Africa for centuries, I'm not talking about 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They have so much wealth, but even in spite of that, they have seen the need to integrate, to work together as blocs, to make them more powerful for global trade, for security, for other related issues. But in Africa, we are still sleeping. And that is why this evening, for example, our conversation is going to look at an event that will take place next week. But before I introduce my guest, I want to share with you a few footnotes I put together about Africa. And these are statistics that I put together because they talk the story of Africans and what we can achieve. For example, it says Africa has the potential to unlock more than $3 trillion in consumer spending. Africa is home to the world's youngest and fastest growing population, expected to nearly double to 2.5 billion people by 2050. And this is a security issue because if African leaders are not able to tap into the platforms that are being created, then it would mean that many young people who are going to add to the 2.5 billion population may now become security threat to the individual African countries. African trades much more with economies, that's very instructive, beyond the continent than within. Only 10% of its imports and 17% of its exports are inter-regional or intra-regional. The continent is urbanizing faster than any other place on planet. This is also very instructive. 60% of Africa's population lives in poverty. Africa's real GDP per capita has grown by only 1.1% annually since 1990. And agriculture, we all know, remains key and backbone for many African countries. It talks about Africa's ability to increase revenues. Africa projected to become one of the world's largest working age population by 2040. And just about 16 years ahead. And then by 2030, the services sector on its current trajectory will create about 85 million net new jobs across the continent, enough to absorb half of new labor market entrants in highly productive work. So that is the picture about Africa. Now, what has informed this conversation is to delve deep into an event that will take place between the 25th and the 27th of January. That's precisely, I guess, next week. And this Africa Prosperity Dialogue will bring a lot of people to be participants of this event. Now, before I introduce my guest, I would want to tease you a little about his profile. My guest is a Mauritanian and a Senegalese by descent, a passionate advocate of African champions, has extensive experience in commodity trade, a partisan of the public-private partnership model, and firmly believes in Africa offering great opportunities, and as such, in execution of full value chain food production projects in West Africa with a strong focus on rice, raising a strong support for leading international companies active in different areas of agro-business, local authorities, development finance institutions, and non-profit organizations. He has headed the Interval Group of companies and also served as vice chairman of the MEF Endowment Fund. He's also a member of the board of both the Winds of Hope Foundation, dedicated to the eradication of Noma in Africa, and the J.A. Kufuor Foundation, focusing on leadership, governance, and development of the African continent. Nick Injak Kani is recently appointed as Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Prosperity Network. Sir, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
Your profile was very long, but I cut it short.
Thank you so much.
Is it because you are long?
I'm not sure. I deserve all this, but thank you so much for your
That's just a teaser. Now, Africa Prosperity Network, you are the CEO. Help us appreciate this network, because it is the reason why this Africa Prosperity Dialogue is taking place, bringing African leaders to Ghana for the 3-day event.
So thank you. The Africa Prosperity Network Secretariat is in existence for literally almost 3 years now. It was set up to help organize events. As we are going, one of the flagship projects of the Secretariat, the Africa Prosperity Network Secretariat, is to organize on a yearly basis a convening which is called the Africa Prosperity Dialogues. So the Africa Prosperity Dialogues is a partnership between the AFCFTA Secretariat,
that's the African Continental Free Trade Agreement
Secretariat, the Presidency of the Republic of Ghana as the host nation, and the Secretariat itself. It is based in Accra, also because the AFCFTA Secretariat is in Accra, but I would say also because Ghana is Ghana in the eyes of the continent since the Nkrumah days. But I would say that Ghana has, and this I really want to say, that Ghana has truly demonstrated and is really one of the top nations. And I mean about...
You can raise your voice a little because you are soft-spoken.
Yes, about Ghana has truly been an example to the face of the continent in its passion to help push the African agenda. And it is likely for this reason that the Secretariat of the AFCFTA is in Accra. And that is an important factor. So the whole idea of this agenda is to be able to convene a number of critical stakeholders, policy leaders, private sector, the various stakeholders, partners, the academia, the heads of states, together, development partners, together on this retreat, and with truly the idea of helping on the implementation of this AFCFTA agenda.
Now, so where is the media in all this? Because in as much as the Africa Prosperity Network has been existing or operating for the past 3 years, it will look as if very few people may have had that interface. And I am privileged to have done some checks to have you in my studio, but it will look as if the media may not yet be actively involved in some of your engagements to be able to tell the story of AFTA and what African governments or the population needs to know to buy into some of the fine ideas you have.
Well, I would say that indeed, again, I mentioned that the APN Secretariat is new.
It's in Accra.
Is in Accra, but the activities are recent in mean that less than 2 years of activity. I would say there has been a massive amount of work in first explaining to the stakeholders what we are about, but also more recently, taking more time maybe with the medias across the whole continent to explain what we're about and what is the joint journey that we're willing to embark the various parts. And media is clearly a critical stakeholder. Today itself, the leadership of the Secretariat and some of the various stakeholders, including the FCFTA high-level delegation, were in Lagos, Nigeria, went specifically for engagement with the media, to let them know about the event of next week, where we are, what will be the format, the discussion, and really as a kind of an interaction with the media, to really be able to capture also from them what they would like to see happen at the event, but also for the media to own the event, to be part of it. It is, again, I think it's really critical to have a very strong, open and free engagement with the media. I think it's the opportunity to talk about any subject. There's no taboo.
Where is the buy-in? I know many African countries have signed onto AFTA. Many of them have ratified this, for example. But just over the last few days, Kenya and Tanzania are having problems, and many people are wondering whether the commitment towards a common platform or a common goal is actually something of key interest. For example, Kenya has banned Kenyan Airways. Tanzania has banned Kenyan Airways flights in tit-for-tat move. Does this come as some of the negative things which we have witnessed over the years? Because at the end of the day, it will look as if there's manipulation somewhere trying to confuse African countries from coming together on one platform.
Yes, it is clearly true that it is not a good signal when these things happen, but they have happened, they are happening, they will keep happening. And I don't think it is clearly linked to Africa only. Well, when we look at the EU, we can see such issues being raised. They maybe have, there's maybe more mechanisms to solve, and a power from the leadership of the organization, the way it's formulated, maybe to impose and facilitate solutions and make sure it happens. You are mentioning about this sad current, but which will be surely solved very quickly. But you would imagine that the same has happened within the EU with between Poland and Germany. We have been seeing this same kind of issue. So it happens. I don't think that we would focus on what is not working, but much more focusing on the fact that there is a highway that has been set with a framework. The nations have come together in saying, yes, it is important that this dream happens, and therefore the AFCFTA has been put in place. It was a long process. It has been a lot of work, but it is happening. At least we have a framework. Now that we have the framework, it's for the people to implement it.
Now, we'll go into the framework and most especially what next week's program hopes to achieve. Last year, for example, from my checks, there was a similar related dialogue, i.e. Africa Prosperity Dialogue. What were the takeaways of that event? Because obviously, looking at the field OAU, which transformed to AU, and then AU, which was expected to just move along with some of the charters under the OAU, now comes across with AFTA. So let's look at last year. I have pictures of some of the attendees of the event. It will be rolling as you give us that brief overview.
Yes, so last year was the first edition of the APD, and it was held during the month of January. I must say also at the conflicting period where you had at the same time the Dakar 2 summit, which had been planned a long way. So, but I would say that this summit has truly helped to set the base of what will be happening this year. Clearly, one of the outcomes is that the parties where all governments were represented, and they came up with the business sector, came up with a compact that has been approved and taken 2 weeks after to the AU, which also has been adopted during the 36th Assembly of the Heads of State, and has really positioned the APD as a recognized platform of the Africa Union, where the outcomes of the discussions, the recommendations that are jointly taken by heads of states and business leaders is considered and will be discussed
next week. Now, in researching about your background, what Africa Prosperity Network has done in the past, I came across some of the pictures of last year's event we saw on the screen. And in my search, I knew that you were appointed somewhere last year as the Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Prosperity Network, after what I read on several websites as very, very competitive search for somebody who was going to be the CEO. But I also read that somebody, which I saw in the pictures, Gabi Asare-Ochredako, is the executive chairman. For us in Ghana, there are some prominent individuals whose name rings a lot of bells in the political circles. And so many might want to see Africa Prosperity Network as a political entity rather than a non-profit organization. How can you convince me that surely your objective is in the interest of Ghana, other countries in Africa in general, and not really something somebody may want to perceive?
Thank you for mentioning it. So let me be very straight with you. Gabi Ochredako is the founder and executive chairman. I call him founder. You know, the vision of what needs to happen, the way he has, and some of the other advisory board members articulated that vision, truly convinced me. You mentioned about Gabi. Let me tell you when I got my first true interaction with Gabi. It was at the time, I can say it now, Senegal and Ghana were competing to host the AFCFTA Secretariat.
That's the AFTA Secretariat.
Yes. And at that time, Gabi called me. I heard that there's a Senegalese that is often here, but are you are you really trying to work so that the secretariat is not in
Senegal,
rather in Senegal than in Ghana. So we laugh, we discuss, and then once the Ghana got the secretariat, that's where we started exchanging views on this, what needs to happen, and really I would say that it's not a new relation. Yes, I've been appointed through a competitive process, but the vision that this gentleman has is powerful. I like to take also the example of Davos, the Professor Schwab from Davos, founder. I mean, it took a long time to push the agenda. Today, Davos is what it is. It's beyond individuals.
That's the World Economic
It is the World
Conference,
Economic Conference. All heads of states are coming, irrespective of who is. But I think it needs a critical number of people and not one individual to make this happen. And I would really like to say that APD is beyond individual. It's beyond a country. APD is beyond, I would like to say, beyond than Ghana. It's continental. It's beyond the sitting heads of states. It's the partnership with the presidency of Ghana as a host nation. So, and APN is a non-profit. The way this whole thing is organized, it's really about the convening party. And when we look at the people that are associated to it, it's continental. It is truly continental. And in Ghana, there are people from all regions, politics, it transcends. So no, really.
2024 in Ghana is a crucial year because we are going into an election. And most of the time, you would notice that when we go into any election in Ghana, it is keenly contested. In as much as there could be opinion polls out there, it is on the D-Day when people vote that Ghanaians will know who will become the next president. So you have Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia, who is contesting. You have former President John Dramani Mahama. Obviously, his political party, just like the MPP and other civil society organizations, will be key stakeholders in Ghana's economy and Ghana's future. And therefore, the Africa Prosperity Dialogue Series obviously is expected to bring all hands on deck, first to know the issues, the networking, concerns. Of course, Ghana today, as we speak, we all know we have our own challenges, and therefore how they can leverage, no matter who wins or who will win, will have already been there before the kickstart. Is this dialogue taking into consideration these critical strategic stakeholders who may be part of the conversations?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, again, the dialogues are a platform where all parties interested in joining and helping push the agenda are convened. So now, what you are mentioning about Ghana applies on the same way in all the other countries, because everybody is invited to come join. The difference, and maybe the reference that you are making to the fact that, yes, Ghana is political, there's an agenda, there are some elections coming, yes, but there will be elections again in
2028.
In 2028.
So your focus is not about what happens or who is becoming the next president, but the focus is on the dialogue series and networking.
It's on the dialogue, it's on the inclusivity, it's making sure that all people from all senses, being political, being religion, being area, that they come here.
What is the level of the buy-in? We have seen several initiatives. I remember in the late 90s, the early 2000s, anytime I moved around parts of the country, I saw huge billboards. ECHO is almost with us. And then, of course, we've heard the story of AFTA, and people are asking how many African countries over the past 1 year or two have actually started trading, doing intra-trading, because they are exploiting the platform that has been provided by AFTA.
Yes, I think to your questions, one is, again, we are again doing on another program, an announcement, creating hope, and nothing is really happening. But I really think that it's setting the tone, the framework, so that the ones who truly will have to implement the AFCTA agreement are privates. So as long as a framework is well structured, it will happen. Now, to say that, again, another announcement, another platform again, yes, people come, talk, make nice pictures, go home, and nothing happens.
That is the perception.
And
they
meet again the next year. But what I would like to say is, we are not saying that we pretend that the APD is the only platform to be, but one thing we are really committed about is to say this platform is an African-owned platform on the African soil in the country that everybody recognizes to be truly a Pan-Africanist champion. So what we are committed to is, in this platform, to be able to say what is going well, what is not going well, what needs to be fixed. And you will see what really drives the whole agenda is related to policies. Let's get the policies right and promote good projects, bankable, show by example. I think this is where you will show a difference. Once a compact, an agreement, we have the work only starts. It's about going, making sure that the whole support is given at the AU level in Addis Ababa, while engaging with the stakeholders, the partners, to start executing programs concretely, and then monitor them. We're going to have series of events, follow-up monitoring, either some that we are leading, some others where we are associated to other partners. One thing, I mean, there has been a clear defined strategy on partnerships with the various critical stakeholders. APN, APD has as partners a number of UN organizations, being the UNDP, the ECA. We have partners, the Africa Development Bank, Afrexim Bank, BADEA, already committed. A new and knocking at the door. There will be a number of series of signing ceremony with some of the other financial institutions. We have commercial bank. We're interacting with the civil societies, a number of institutions, foundations. We really, as long as they are on the shared vision, which is, let us transform Africa. I really believe that there will be impact. And the way this huge gathering, commitment, arrival of dignitaries, of civil societies, youth, women organization coming together so that the voice is heard, it's a shared voice, and we are coming with this, with a compact, an agreement, a framework, and we'll be accountable.
It sounds very exciting to hear, and for me as an individual or somebody who has some level of influence in the media, I would say we'll buy in it. Our media house will associate with any initiative that is geared towards projecting Ghana's economy, Africa's economy, and by extension, creating opportunities for all. But there are clear and pressing threats that you cannot run away from: bad governance, corruption. And of course, when you spoke, you were talking about framework, etc., etc. But the fact is, you can sign a compact. The opportunities will be there. Just as people will cry about some of the things they don't like about Ghana today, or Nigeria, or maybe Cote d'Ivoire, or any other African country, even Rwanda, which people refer to as one of the good examples of a country that is transforming very fast. Some will say they have critical issues about governance, which does not satisfy international standards. Now, at such dialogues, do you speak truth to peers? Because African peer review mechanism, for example, did not achieve what many anticipated and the OAU would have done, where they call failing presidents or abusive presidents or corrupt presidents out and expose them just to make sure they are doing the right things.
I would say that I would say the following is that today we live in a global world. Information
is abundant.
Is abundant. I mean, you just spend time, you spent a few hours on internet, you were able to come up. So the information is there. I do believe that we have, in general, I'm not saying all countries, a very strong leadership. I mean, you know, I've been in this country, for example, I've been working in this country literally all the time from 2006 to today. Ghana.
No wonder you are a member of the J. Kufuor Foundation.
Yes, it's true that that everybody knows that I have a passion for President Kufuor, because I mean, in a way, he has opened my eyes to a number of things. But I've been working what I wanted to say is that for the last 20 years or so in Ghana, I've been interacting. Ghana has always been blessed with leadership. I mean, this is something that we from outside and the ones who have been in this country, and that has been consistent.
But many Ghanaians may disagree with you in terms of leadership, perhaps today compared to yesterday.
No, I think that, but you asked me, I'm just telling you my perspective from what I see. I think the issue on the continent is really related to governance. It's not the leadership. But when I say governance, it's a shared government from the top to the bottom. You see where I'm coming?
I'm not convinced. Can you break it down? Because many people will assume that once we have people who are in charge, they will control everything. And therefore, when it doesn't go well, you don't blame me, a poor man who expects somebody to chart the path for me to follow.
It's a long conversation that maybe we won't have. But the point I'm making is it should be a shared governance. When there's a vision, everybody has his role to play, from top to the bottom.
Where institutions are key.
I think this is the fact of life in general. So it is for everybody to buy and play its part. The issues are everywhere on this continent, but there are also good things. Let's highlight what's worked well, and let us work more for shared common goal at region level, at country level, at what some call sub-regional, like the ECOWAS, and at continental level. Because our destiny is common. It's common. And there's no way that collectively we are not able to elevate collectively this continent. So the governance is also how our countries, leaders, region interact together. So that's why it's a cross-cutting edge, this governance issue.
African countries must take advantage of. My guest is Njakani. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Njakani.
Jack Can, but the N comes after the J, so but still Jack Can. Okay, it's a Mauritanian Senegalese. Then of course he's my guest, the chief executive of the Africa Prosperity Network. Before we take a break, there is this critical issue that has always bothered me whenever we talk about Africa integration, after talking about EU, all those things, which is the dominance of the West, the influence they have on individual states, and how they seek to leverage on their own blocks they are creating. For example, Russia today, with the support of China, South Africa, you're looking at Brazil, they're talking about BRICS. You look at the US, they are also looking at how they can have the domineering influence on Europe and by extension targeting some Asian countries because of China. And all these powerful countries are also keeping an eye on Africa because of our vast untapped potential. Don't you see this as a threat? And for which reason such dialogues must strategically shape conversations to counter the potential use of such powerful countries to undermine what you seek to achieve?
It is clearly a threat, but it's clearly an opportunity.
Are you not tickling yourself?
No, it
Why?
is an opportunity. Clearly, it is an opportunity. It means that we have what it takes. Let us just play it right. And it starts by coming together. And this is why this AFCTA implementation is so critical. Because when you secure a 1.4 billion market, that it is yours, and using the same rule, Virgin, that the other continent have been the EU, been the Asian agreement, or others, you are strong. When you have secured a 1.4 billion market that is your own, the rest is simply about performance execution, as long as the policies are right. So it's important that we set the policies. And I do believe, to re-answer more precisely to your question, the appetite that those nations have on the continent are an opportunity for us. It can bring additional funding, but it's just a matter of saying, let's partner. You really think that today a Ghanaian group or a group from Guinea-Bissau will be able to invest, trade, do things in China or in the US or in Russia with the same facility that they are coming here? So, but at the same time, they are needed. This world is global today. But I think it's where we have to think more together and do two things. One is try to break a bit these silos. And the second, and this is applied to everybody, and I would like to teach you and say this, stop this ego. This ego that happen at the highest level between head of states, but also could happen between ministers, can happen between journalists, can happen between a farmer that is seated on the border of Burkina vis-a-vis his own brother that is sitting on the border, on the other side of the border in Ghana. Let's kill this ego. Let us break these silos so that we work, we develop that relation of trust and focus on what is more essential. You know, sometimes this continent, I see, we are so many just to go to meetings and prepared for negotiations. I think, you see, and I'm coming back always to this.
So the talk is too much. Action must take place. Now, we'll be taking a short break. My guest is Jack Can. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Prosperity Network. In fact, when we come back, we'll be looking at next week's event, which is of interest to me because we want to know who is attending, who are the key stakeholders who will be making presentation throughout the 3-day event. When I checked from various websites, I've seen a number of very influential African presidents who are attending. Of course, I've seen a lot of businesses from the checks I did just to gather information before this conversation. But what will they be discussing and what is at stake for you? Again, we also know that youth unemployment, agriculture, which is a huge area that is following, that must also be looked at, is critical because that is where many people will assume that the potentials for industrialization will come from. Are African countries already implementing policies towards this agenda? Is it bearing fruit? If it is not bearing fruit, where can we tap into best practice? Of course, Jack has over 20 years experience in that industry, and therefore I would want to find out from him what he knows, what he finds wrong, and what he thinks we should be doing together as a people, and how obviously we should be doing the intra-trade that is key to make sure revenue cuts across and stays in Africa rather than the capital flight which is being taken out at our expense. And of course, that's not going to be it alone because we are going to look at industrialization, minerals, which is key. Africa is rich with several minerals that are of interest. Recently in Niger, when there was a coup d'etat, we got to understand how important lithium, for example, is. In Ghana, we also have discovered lithium, just like oil and other mineral resources. We'll be looking at all these after the break, but I want you to reflect on what I picked on AFTE's website. It's just key about a few things Africans can do together. It looks exciting. Then after the break, my guest will be with me in the studio again for the rest of our conversation.
Upon your arrival, you are introduced to your butler, who plans your itinerary. So many activities, all in the same premises. Visit the gym or the stables, they have it all. At my break, I'm able to practice my pattern. They used only electric vehicles here. This creates a serene environment. I'm told it's over 1,000 acres. My cabin here sits on 2 acres with a large terrace space overlooking my private swimming pool. Now this is royalty. They have their own farms, thousands of fruit trees. I can also have my lunch here at the waterfall. Quite a beautiful place you have yourself.
The average human body mass should have at least 60% water for optimal performance in any physical or mental exercise. We can help you maintain it naturally. X natural mineral water. Simply natural.
Thanks for staying with us. This Ideas Exchange on TV XYZ. My guest is Jack Kani. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Africa Prosperity Network. We are looking at the Africa Prosperity Dialogues. 2024 edition is taking place next week between January 25th and 27th. In fact, the theme is Delivering Prosperity in Africa, Produce, Add Value and Trade. This event will take place at the Peduase Presidential Lodge at Ebre Hills, isn't it? Right. Now, who is attending this event?
I must say that to date, we have more than 800 delegates who have registered. We have invited, the Secretariat has invited business leaders, academia, civil society representative, and government policy leaders, ministers,
across the continent.
Across the continent, from all regions, literally all countries, the continent, and all countries will be represented. To date, a number of head of states have already confirmed their participation. I understand that more than 10 have already to date, and understand that more are confirming. They will be present on the last day. So let me run you maybe on the format. For the first 2 days, it is organized in the form of a retreat where the various stakeholders will be discussing through panel discussion, roundtable discussion, side events, the thematics that you have mentioned that are related to APD 2024. The theme is indeed produce, add value, trade. The thematic areas are, on one side, agriculture and food security. The second is related to natural resources and their value addition. And the third is related to industrialization as a means to enhance inter-Africa trade. Let me maybe also zoom on, obviously, the critical enablers that are related to, that will be discussed mostly on the second day of the retreat, which are infrastructure, meaning roads, sea, air infrastructure, and related. The second critical enabler is related to ICT, both hardware, software. And the third one is related to finance.
Which is critical.
Finance, which is absolutely critical, knowing that policies will be also driving this overall agenda. Let me maybe just summarize and zoom on each. Agriculture, clearly the fact will be mentioned about the huge food deficit that we today have and that potential. But as President Adesina from the African Bank keeps repeating, we are not eating potential. So the discussions will be about how do you increase productivity in agriculture related to the food crops, the maize, the rice, these key items, but also, and we feel, how do we ensure that you can develop the infrastructure with a strong zoom on irrigation development, which is absolutely critical to this whole area. And we will also be looking at the cash crop. We know about the Ghana Cocoa Initiative, these two countries together who produce
Then we have cashew,
60
we have several
cashew.
of such cash crops.
Yes.
But let me dwell a little on agriculture, for example. You and I have had the privilege to travel to many countries. You grew up in Switzerland, largely, and you know many of those countries around that belt are seriously into agriculture. If you go to Europe, as your plane is touching down, you can see the agrarian fields where you see serious commercial farming that is feeding those nations and much for export that you and I in a country like Ghana or any African country would depend on. What are we doing differently and failing? In Ghana, for example, we have some initiatives that should be giving us that boost, but maybe we are not yet there. And we know previous governments may have done similar. We have one planting for food and jobs. We have one district, one factory. We have, how do you call it? One district, one village, warehouse, one village, one dam. So if you look at the concept, the dam would have been solving the irrigation aspect. The warehouse would have been serving as the basket where you put the product to look for markets. You have the industry, which was supposed to maybe create the value chain. And of course, the export would have been the end result. But over the last 5, 6, 7 years, as an individual, I would tell you I've not seen that impact manifest as it should be. And it is not limited to Ghana. If you go to Nigeria, yes, rice may be doing well. Poultry may be doing quite well to some extent in Nigeria. But on a larger scale, Nigeria may not be doing that much well in agriculture. Cote d'Ivoire is an example. I'm just looking at countries within the sub-region. As for Togo, they have not even started to get to a certain level yet. What is being done wrongly that from your experience you think African leaders must be bold, speaking truth to power, must be dealing with?
Okay. I will answer on two phases. First, let me quickly come on some of the countries that you have mentioned.
Right.
You take the case of, you mentioned
Nigeria.
Of Nigeria.
Yeah. Cote d'Ivoire.
Cote d'Ivoire has been doing very well on the cash crop. Within a decade, Cote d'Ivoire has established itself as the #1 producer of cashew, has been doubling the production of cocoa. There are things that are happening very positively on the continent. But at the same time, Cote d'Ivoire, over the last 20 years, have moved from literally self-sufficiency in rice to 2 million tons of rice importation. Importation.
How?
But take Ghana. Ghana has moved from 100,000 metric tons of imports 20 years ago to 750,000 metric tons of year. Senegal has reached 1.4 million tons. Now, how? Why? You mentioned about Togo. Togo are doing the very good things, huh?
Well, then it's a surprise to me.
So what I'm saying is that each countries are doing
have
well,
their own dynamics.
But the second part of your question is why? Why are we not? I would also like to answer on two phases. Unless we fix our policies and clearly set the tone to, I wouldn't say protect, but to support our local production, we'll keep circling and nothing will happen. We'll meet again in 1 year, it will be the same. Why I'm saying, see, let me just give you 2, 3 examples. Success stories, rice production. In Africa, there are very few. Which one are they? Tanzania, Mali, and to some extent, Nigeria. Why? One simple reason. They have put quotas on rice importation. They have either banned the rice importation or created massive quotas on rice importation. And suddenly, within a few years, these countries have reached or literally reached self-sufficiency. None of the other countries have done so. So, and why is it necessary? The rice that is coming to the country, Indian rice, Chinese rice, Vietnamese rice, is subsidized. Sometimes it's subsidized 3 times. At the time of production, at the time of export, where they can apply subsidies because they are exporting, and at the time, and the third time is in paying a very high price subsidized to the farmer. I'll end that in saying our continent is the only continent where our farmers, when they produce, they don't have already a readily accessible market. A farmer, a beet producer in Germany, a maize producer in France, a rice producer in India, a cotton producer in the US, they don't have to think about market.
No, but in Africa,
they just produce, they have a high market.
They have a high market, but in
happening.
Africa, for example, if I produce enough, let's say, cashew, and assuming I cannot get market out there, and let's say Guinea or Cameroon has closed its doors, instead of buying from me, is looking at importing same product from, let's say, Germany. Is it not our own creation of this problem that AFTA is supposed to be addressing?
I think that that what you have mentioned applies to industrialization. I would like to say that in case of agriculture, yes and no. But I see your point. When a country closes its border for the food not to go out, I mean, Ghana has done it. Senegal has done it. All these nations during the food crisis. When there's crisis, they tend to close. But the point I was making is that we are competing very often with not the same tools with the others. So I think this is what, on the agri space, apart from some of the cash crops when there is a market, but even though in these cases we are not in control while we should be in control. Cocoa, we should be in full control today. The cocoa is being produced literally in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire for 65%. Cashew nut, Cote d'Ivoire is exporting 1 million tons of cashew. Should be in control. There should be legislation. No more export of raw materials. Let's create the value here. I think this is what the AFCFTA is about, but there has to be a framework, incentive, and making sure that once it's decided, everybody plays the role.
What are your expectations going into next week's dialogue?
Next week dialogues is, it's about concrete, open discussions, a number of round tables. We will facilitate a number of events, open for some, by invitation, where we want these leaders to be able to
have frank
discussions. We will, and together with some of our institutional partners, banks, DFIs, civil society, try to push to the agenda so that they can, that we come up with the
so as a passionate Pan-African, for example, our time is up. If you were speaking to the camera, Ghanaians, Africa at large, because this conversation is on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it can always be accessible, what would you say as a passionate Pan-African whose interest is to see how Africans can come together, integrate their economies to create opportunities for growth and prosperity in Africa?
Come and use forums like the APD. Make sure that it is collectively owned. Let's have frank conversation. Let us showcase what is good. Let us earmark what needs to be fixed. Let's come together, because our destiny is collective. It is not about this individual or not. It is owned by everybody. And none has the right just to say aside and criticize in saying, oh, talk, talk, talk. Come and participate to this talk. But also let us make sure that we embark collectively in this journey. Our destiny is ours. So I truly believe that APD is a place, a sweet spot that has this ability to convene the critical African stakeholders. And it is to us to work together to help drive the change, not only by example, but also by working together to get to know each other from all over the region. That would be the message. And let us fix our policies. Let's take advantage of our market at country level, at regional level, and at continental level. This drives everything. And again, just a question of performance. And everybody will have his role to play. And that's the message, really. If you were to ask me, I would like to convey.
Okay, so Jack Khan has been my guest, and I've told you that this will appear to be a very exciting conversation that will take place for the next 3 days, starting 25th of January 2024 to the 27th of January. And this is taking place around the Bree Hills, that's Peduasi. Yes, of course, they've shared it on the screen. This is the Africa Prosperity Dialogue 2024. But my interest is that of how investors, the business community, to be specific, academia, because sometimes academia shapes some of these conversations, and most especially critical stakeholders. For example, I see labor as one of the forces that must have interest in whatever happens as Africans put their heads together, because labor may be working to oil the engine of any country's growth, but largely they depend on the taxpayers like me and my poor mother in the village, who are looking up to such critical strategic partners to pile pressure on governments across the continent to make sure policy frameworks are implemented to the letter, policy frameworks get the results that are targeted. And of course, if collectively African countries are understanding the need to integrate their economies, then of course you and I as young people who do not have jobs would see industries now showing interest, having that confidence to help our continent grow. I can tell you, several years ago, China was seen as a developing country. Today, China, through strategic partnership and right policies, which was driven by people who were sincere and patriotic to China as a continent, irrespective of how huge the population is, China is rubbing shoulders with the US and can tell US in the face what it likes and what it doesn't like. Same, if you look at African continent, for example, South Africa may have been telling a good story, and so South Africa is directly or indirectly rubbing shoulders with some of these powerful countries compared to Egypt or Morocco or some of these fine African countries at the top. I strongly believe, and it has always been my passion, to follow any conversation that has Ghana or Africa's interest at heart. And I can bet you that TVXYZ and by extension our media platforms will follow next week's conversations and the rest to come in future, and we'll share them with you as and when we come across anything of interest to you as a citizen. My name is Ahianyo, and thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you so much.
I've learned a lot from you today.
I learned a lot.
And I believe that we'll meet again.
God bless you.
We'll meet again next week. Bye for now.